and it's been sort of, it hasn't been storms like people have had in Bordeaux and a bit further around towards Montpellier. It's been just consistent heavy rain, and our vineyards were already a little bit waterlogged from previous rain. And it's just kept going, basically. It's just kept raining, and it's rained onto sort of sodden soils, so it's not draining away, so we can't get the tractor in to spray and protect the vines. And then the grass is growing. We've actually got grass down here this year, and it's like higher than the vines in some of the vineyards, but we can't get in because the tractor can't get in because it's too soggy in the vineyards. So it's all going on.
Wow.
It's just really made me realise, this might sound a bit strange, I mean, it is a particularly difficult spring, but it's really made me realise how difficult it is making or growing grapes, not even making the wine. I think that might be the easy bit. But actually, I don't know, I mean, it's obviously me and Jean-Marc, but how he copes with it, and just, he's always got a smile on his face, and he's out there like mending the tractor at the moment, but just sort of, wow. And I think we're not, I don't know, I just never really appreciated until I was stuck here at home for the past 8 weeks, sort of exactly how much goes into it and how much stress it is. And
yeah.
Yes. Katie, you've been, just as a number of people are trickling in and kick off shortly, but you yourself have been immersed in the vines every morning.
I have.
Instagram live video, you're taking people around, or how's that?
Exactly. I just thought, like, I'm here. We are allowed to go out into our vineyards because it's obviously our work. So I'm going out to the vineyards more than I would do normally. I just thought I'd really like to share this with other people who perhaps can't get out and just want that breath of fresh air. So it's a very casual stroll around the vineyard. It's live. It's on Instagram in the mornings. It's quite early though. It's at 7:30 UK time.
I watch it with my son over my poached eggs.
Yeah, exactly. That's what people do.
He's 3, he loves it, yeah.
What people do, they like sit at home eating their breakfast or having a cup of coffee, or some people even go back to bed. So there's like all these people watching from the sofa in their pajamas. And I just briefly sort of take you on a quick ramble around the vineyard, and I just show you the leaves. And it's been amazing because some people have said, I never realized that different vines had different leaves. And you sort of realize, wow, you know, I can show you this, and you can learn something from it as well. And with all the wild flowers that are out at the moment, and just the herbs in the vineyard, it is a great time to be able to get out there, and to take people with me is even better. So yeah, we're having fun. We have little competitions as well. You can win things, wild herbs.
Cool. Yeah. Very good. Okay, cool. Well, I think we'll kick off there. We've got 1,000 people on tonight on Zoom, which is amazing. And we're also live on Facebook to many more. So welcome, everyone. I'm Eamon, the wine guy. Anyone who's an angel watching will, I'm sure, have heard from me on the emails. And I'm joined by Ray, the wine nut, down in Marlow there. And most importantly, joined by Katie Jones. Delighted to welcome her to our Thirsty Tuesday for the first time. I'm sure a lot of people will know Katie or know her wines. I'm really thrilled to be able to welcome her on tonight. Katie, I mean, we first came across paths, I think, back in 2011, I think it was, or maybe 2012, back then, in very unfortunate circumstances. And, you know, I'm sure we'll talk about that in a bit. You know, I was actually on Twitter, that cesspit of hate, and you know, that Twitter has become, and I've barely looked at it since, but this was definitely a good thing that came out of idly browsing Twitter. I just saw that an English winemaker down in France had come into a spot of bother with the locals and had vandals enter the winery and left in quite a sticky situation. So got on the phone straight away and talked to Katie, and very quickly we got thousands of customers involved to help turn around Katie's business. So that's how we started. And you know, down the years, we've done lots of wines together. Shared lots of great moments, drank some amazing wines, and every time I seem to speak to Katie, I I learn something new. I get a new perspective on, you know, the life of a winemaker, and the challenges you come up against. And just even hearing you at the start here, Katie, talking about the weather, or some local beast roaming the vineyard, or local humans, you know, trying to ruin your life. I think you're every time, you know, something challenging comes up. But for me, tasting the quality of the wines, you know, for me, makes them taste even better, knowing your pursuit of your craft and the dedication you put into them, despite, you know, all the challenges that face you. So really looking forward to chatting tonight and finding more about you. We've got lots of people on. If you've got one of Katie's wines, I've got her Lagar Carignan here, which is tasting great. So if you've got one of Katie's wines, great. Let us know what you're drinking. If not, let us know what you're drinking anyway. And
shall I let you know what I'm drinking?
Yeah, go for it.
Me and Mr. Jones White is what's in my glass.
Ooh, nice. Very good. So yeah, Katie, why don't we take it back to the start, and how did you end up from Leicestershire to the south of France making wine?
Well, that's going back quite a long time now. That was over 25 years ago, in 1993. And basically, I've just always loved France. It was always my dream to be able to live in France, to speak French, to marry a Frenchman. And that was basically what I wanted to do. And I worked in Paris. I'd gone back to Southampton and started working for a wine importer called Thierry's. And I worked there for a couple of years, but I missed France so much. And what I missed was the real France, like what I call the real France, or La France profonde, which is like not the big cities, it's the country, it's the middle of nowhere. It's where, for me, you get the real France. And so basically, I went on a holiday and I went to visit some of the producers that we were working for with the importer. And I remember I ended up in Touchon, which is where I live now. And it was just like, okay, this is it. It's like 800 people in the middle of nowhere. So we're between Narbonne and Perpignan. But both of those towns are an hour away, each of them. Wiggly roads to get up here. And as I say, just like 800 people, all farmers, all in the local cooperative, so all growing their grapes. And I arrived on a summer's evening, and the whole village was out having a lovely village barbecue, or the village fete, it's called. It lasts all weekend, and they were all lined up, like eating on trestle tables under the plane trees on the main promenade. Brilliant. And I just thought, you know, I've arrived, je suis arrivée. This is it, this is me, I love it. And fortunately enough, they offered me a job at the cooperative. They don't have many English people turning up, a 27-year-old at that time who'd worked in wine, who knew their products, who loved the wines and wanted to help promote it. And when I was there, they just said, I think they probably said it in passing, I was like, if you want a job, you know, just give me a ring. And so I went back to Southampton and gave them a ring, and started on what was going to be a 15-year job at the local cooperative in the village.
Wow.
And yeah, no, it feels like ages ago now. It definitely does feel like a long time ago. But when I got here, I mean, I had that dream of, you know, how wonderful it is. And I think that just stuck with me. I was able to speak French. I don't know if you've read Manon des Sauces and Jean de Florette, just lovely novels by Pagnol about village life I think it's in the Luberon, but it could be Touchon. And I'd read those when I was younger and au pairing in France, and they just really stuck with me. I wanted to be Manon des Sauces and have my herd of goats and wander around the hills. And when I got here, I just thought, oh, it's fantastic, I love it. So that was how I managed, or that's how I ended up sort of down here in the south of France and working for the local wine cooperative.
Okay. And then the next step, which was be becoming a winemaker or buying Vineyard? Which came first, or how did that come about?
Oh, actually, because I'm one of those people, I've never planned anything in my life, career-wise, well, anything basically. So I've never had, this is very definite, this is where I want to be in 5 years. After that, I'm going to move up here and I'm going to do this. I've just sort of bumbled along and seized opportunities that have come my way. And so when I was at the cooperative, it was actually my parents from Ashby de la Zouch, and they said to me when I was still at the cooperative, but they said, oh, could you just buy us a little vineyard? And I basically thought, well, yeah, I probably could actually. So I went out and I looked for a little tiny vineyard for my parents in Ashby, so that they could like mention to their friends that they owned a vineyard in the south of France. And I came across my first vineyard, which is a domaine, which was to be Domaine Jones, but it's just across the border, because I was still working at the cooperative. So it's just across the border in Roussillon. So I'm in the Languedoc, and the other wine growing area next door is the Roussillon. And I bought a little vineyard there for my parents. And that was how it all started. I was still at the cooperative, still selling their wines. And then I just think I needed a fresh challenge. I just wanted something different to do. And I mean, it sounds a bit silly now, but around here, there's not much else to do apart from growing grapes, because that's what everybody does. So I sort of thought, well, if I want to stay in this village and still stay here, speak French, I'd met Jean-Marc by that time as well. It's like, well, what should I do? And Jean-Marc was like, well, why don't we make some wine from that vineyard that you bought with your parents, rather than just selling the grapes and getting somebody to work it? Why don't we just give it a shot and try and make a bit of wine? And that's how it started. In 2009, we made our first vintage, and we picked the grapes from that first little vineyard in Morey, it's a village, and we made 8,000 bottles of Grenache. And that seems like a very long time ago now, but and we gave some to my parents, and we had some, and we thought it's quite nice, and we put it into some competitions, and we got silver medals from Decanter, and we got some Parker points on as well, over 90, I think it's 91 and 92. Wow. So we just thought, wow, you know, this is easy. It's like, let's buy another vineyard.
And what was, I mean, coming from, you know, not being a winemaker, you know, are you working with incredible grapes? What is like the secret there, where your first vintage and you win awards and medals like that? I
think, yeah, that is exactly what it is for me. Like 80% of a quality of the wine is in the vineyard. And I didn't know anything about vines or vineyards or how to make wine. I just knew what looked nice, because I was in marketing and sales. And the vineyard we bought, it was old vines. So they were 80-year-old vines. They were on a really poor soils, and they had really low yields. And I just thought, yeah, that seems to add up. That sounds good. They'll probably make a good wine. But we had no reference, because all of the vineyards that I've bought since would have previously been made, the wine would have been made in a cooperative. So we wouldn't have known the individual quality coming from each of those vineyards. So that one that we bought, when we made the wine, we just thought, well, let's try it out. But unfortunately, Jean-Marc's not here this evening, because his tractor's broken down, so he's outside trying to mend it. But Jean-Marc knows everything about the local vineyards. He knows which grape is best in which in which soil type. He knows what the yield should be, how you get the lower yields. And I think between us, we just managed to create something quite special with his sort of expertise in the vineyards and knowing about the vines, and my sort of more romantic image of making wine and what I thought it should be like, rather than what it is actually like. And I think it just sort of went well together. So yeah.
Well, Katie, so you mentioned just at the beginning of that piece, you said you came across old vines on poor soil, certain grape, and just for everyone that's watching, why do old vines make good wines?
Yeah.
Or vieille vigne in French, is it?
Vieille vigne. Yeah.
Come on, Ray.
Come on.
Bit of pronunciation.
That was an Irish-French pronunciation. Villiers vinges. Yeah, go ahead.
The vieux vignes and the old vines. Yeah, I think a lot of it, I mean, I have big discussion with Jean-Marc about this. A lot of the quality grapes from this area come from low yielding vines. And old vines are naturally lower yielding because they're older, so they produce less. So that really helps just to keep the yields low. And basically, if you just think, I don't know, of a tomato plant, if you have a really bumper crop,
yeah,
quality of your tomatoes might not be quite as good as if you just grown 3 or 4. And it's exactly the same with the vines. If you've got too many grapes, firstly, they'll be a bit diluted and you'll get a lighter style of wine. Secondly, if you've got too many grapes on your vine, it's very difficult to protect them. So to protect them from fungal infection like mildew and odium, because the bunches are all really squashed together because of the high yield. So it's much harder to get quality grapes in our area from a vine that has too many grapes on it for those reasons. Also, it's very hot down here, usually, and very dry. And the old vines, their root system is obviously like really well established. So my old vines are up to 110 years old, and their root system can go down to about 5 meters. So it just means that they will always be able to get some water and some minerals. And it just gives a much better balance in the grapes. You can tell immediately when they come into the winery and you press the first juice or get the first juice out of the grapes. It's delicious. It's so well balanced.
Very good. Nice one. So it's more of the good stuff, more of the nutrients and the minerals going into fewer grapes, being spread less thinly, let's say. Okay, that makes sense. Thank you. Nice one. Emo.
Very good. And so then, Katie, you know, Naked actually started in 2008. You started at Dement Jones in 2009. So we're both businesses in our relative infancies when we crossed paths. Could you tell the guys watching what happened and how all that came about?
I'm wrinkling my nose a bit because it's not a very nice part or time that we went through when we met. Not because we met you, Eamon, but basically it was.
Most people say. Usually.
My God.
It was back in 2013, actually, when we first met. And as you mentioned, to begin with, you sent me an email or you phoned me up. And that was literally, we had just had our white wine emptied. So somebody had broken into the winery and they'd actually emptied our vats of white wine it was ready for bottling. It was in April. I remember it was on April Fool's Day, and I just thought, I'm not going to tell anybody today because nobody's going to believe me. But basically, I went into the winery one day, and I had some customers with me, some friends from the neighbouring village, and I was really proud to show them our white wine. And I went to the first tank. We'd actually had them, they were outside around the back of the winery, which is quite common practice because we were going to bottle and they weren't stable. So we wanted to get them nice and cold outside. And I went to the first tank and just opened up the tasting tap that you have to take some wine out, and nothing came out. You know, like real sort of British style, I just went, oh, I'll just try another vat, thinking, bit strange. And I went to the vat next to it. I did the same thing, turned the tap, and nothing came out. And then I thought, so I phoned Jean-Marc and I said, Jean-Marc, have you moved the white wine? And he just went, no. And he knew before I did that there wasn't any wine left in the tanks. He just, well, there's a bit of history behind it. But, and then I looked down and the taps were actually open. The valves at the bottom of the tank had been opened, and literally the wine had just sort of disappeared, just been left to run into the floor of the winery, and it had all gone into our sort of underground water tank that we had, but literally just been thrown away, just been emptied.
Wow. And did you ever catch the people that did that, or?
No. Basically, the gendarmes came and they said, oh yeah, your vats are empty. We went, Okay. And it was difficult times at the time. There was some friction with the cooperative. Things weren't going very well. It was sort of understandably a really difficult time for everybody. The markets were hard. It was 2000, well, that was 2013, but we'd just coming out of the world recession. The markets, they'd lost a couple at the cooperative because I'd left, but not because I'd left. I had left. There was a world recession and they lost some of the markets. And I think, I don't know, you could go crazy trying to think, why would anybody do that? I have lots of theories. I try not to think about it too much anymore, but one is that I used to work now in retrospect, and for me, it just sort of fits in with village life in a way. I was working in their heart and soul of the village, which is the cooperative, for 15 years, selling their wine. So I was helping, and I was, sort of everybody said hello, firstly, and everybody appreciated what I was doing. And then I did that job for 15 years, and I sold about 50 million bottles. And I just decided one day I wanted to do something else, which I thought was quite normal. It's like, well, you want to change after 15 years. And so I handed my notice in and I didn't leave to start the wine thing. I left just because I'd sort of had enough at the cooperative. And I think a lot of people in the village didn't understand how I could leave sort of, as I said, the heart and soul of the village, the cooperative, and go and do something else in sort of difficult times during the recession. And I don't know, I try and understand basically. And so I think it was just very difficult times. I left, and then I started making wine, which I think it was just seen as sort of competition, although, 10,000 bottles compared to what was being produced at the local cooperative was nothing. And I think it was more, I used to work there, I left, but I stayed in the village, and I did something which could be seen as competition, and they lost customers. So it was obviously me who'd stolen the customers from the cooperative. I mean, I hear snippets every now and then, or I used to. Now it's sort of, thankfully, a long way away. But I think that it just built up, and then that was somebody's way of telling me that perhaps I should go and make wine somewhere else, which I didn't.
Sounds like almost in a very, well, it's not positive, but a socialist situation where it's a cooperative and you're all working together, and then someone leaves the socialist movement to do something for their own good, which sort of is a break in the clause of socialism.
I don't know. I mean, it's all thoughts that go through my head, and that is the thought that I'm sort of decided upon. So I think.
And what
Katie, I see a few customers on here were involved in that rescue case back in 2013. Tell us about that day.
That's much better.
Total contrast.
So much positive. There's so much more positive. And thank you, if you're listening, and thank you for those who did buy the rescue case. But so basically, a phone call from Eamon. We were in the depths of despair. We were just like, no, we weren't even in despair. I think we were just in shock. We were just like, we're trying to do something different. We're trying to create these lovely wines, and we've just been completely set back. And so when you phoned up, I remember it well. You said, no, we can help. We'll get a case together. And I was thinking, but we haven't got any wine, And I remember the first time I just said, no, I'm sorry. No, it's not going to work. We've got no wine. And you sent me another email. You said, Kate, I don't think you really understand how we work. And I didn't really understand how you work, to be honest. So, and you explained it really clearly. And you just said, we've got a lot of angels, and these angels, they're called angels for a reason, and they can step in and they can help people in these situations. And basically you said to me, let's try and get some wines together and go and see some of your friends, probably outside of the village, and get a case of, I think it was 12 bottles of wine together, and we'll put in some of your Fitti from your old vineyards, Fitti Lagar. And that's what we did. We got a case together with some Corbière and some Syrah, I think it was. And you put it on the marketplace as a deal. And I still remember sitting there with Jean-Marc, because, yeah, we'd heard of you, but we had absolutely no idea what you could do and how quickly you could do something. So this is like 2 weeks after we just lost all of our wine. Me and Jean-Marc are sitting downstairs having lunch. And I said to Jean-Marc, oh, I'll just put the computer on, because you can actually see the sales going and how many people are going to order the case. And it was just like, we were just like, oh, wow. It was just magical. I have a drink.
Yeah.
I think I need one.
Here's you, Angels. Absolutely.
But it was like, it was so amazing for us to be in this little tiny village, like in the middle of nowhere, and to get the support of the Angels and everybody who bought that case. And for us, it was more than selling the case. It was a support. It was a support that we then got from the Angels, and the messages. I mean, if you imagine here, we were like, and still are, excommunicated basically from the village. It's not that bad now. Jean-Marc's parents live here and his family. We do have friends here. But at the time, it was very much like, we are on our own here. If we, you know, decide to keep going, doing what we're doing, we know that it's not going to be like aperitifs with the voisins, the neighbours. It's going to be difficult. And then to know behind that there were so many people, Angels, who just sent the messages they sent. It was just, I still think I haven't replied to all of them. So I'm really sorry if you never got to reply. But it was just like, it was amazing. It was totally in contrast to what we were living here. And it totally motivated us to keep going and to get back up and to just say, no, we really believe in what we're doing, and other people do, and they're 100% behind us. And that case was the proof of it. So no, it was like you said, it was a memorable moment, and in such contrast to what we'd just been through. It was, yeah, totally amazing.
And we definitely realized, you know, that was one of, again, we were early on in our business and learning our way through. And, you know, there were a couple of days like that with Carmen Stevens, with Roddy Stoke, with Sam Plunkett and yourself, where we just got thousands of people behind, you know, a winemaker like that. And, you know, what was powerful was, you know, in contrast to this, you know, the supermarket or the traditional industry where, you know, people just buy on a discount or a label, we could pull together several thousand people from all over the country to get behind one, you know, talented individual who, you know, might need a dig out or might need a bit of good luck sent their way, and really get behind them. And, you know, that's when we realized, you know, that's the real power of crowdfunding. It's not just some trendy term, which, you know, is, but, you know, that's the real power. And that's when we knew, right, we're onto something as well. So, yeah, it worked amazingly for everyone. And I can see that the comments there from customers, you know, everyone was just so thrilled to be able to help. And
yeah, no, it was fantastic. And I know customers, when I'm on the tour, they still ask me, they just say, how's it going? How are you in the village? You know, is everything okay? Then people come down to see us in Touchon, and all of them are like really concerned, and they just want to know how it's going. So it's fantastic. It's not just buying the wine, like I said, it's the actual friendships that you create, and the support you get for somebody who's, as I said, trying to do something a bit different, perhaps shouldn't be doing it. Sometimes I feel I shouldn't be doing it, but just doing it differently. And
very good. Okay, we'll pause there. Guys, if anyone's got any questions, use the Q&A functionality on Zoom for Katie, or if you're on Facebook, just comment and one of the guys will pick that up. We'll nip over now to Ray, who's our resident wine nut, who gets sent hundreds of bottles every week, it seems. And he's just going to whiz us through some of his empties, some highlights from the past week's tasting.
Yeah, okay. So my name's Ray, and I'm the wine director. I taste wines and find new wines to make sure that everything that gets to you, lighting, is in the style and the order that it should be. And so as we're in lockdown, the samples are coming here. So I'm tasting through, and I just want to show you about 3 or 4 wines that I think you'll be excited to hear about. So about a year and a half ago or 2 years ago, Amy and I were in Chile, and we met Luca Hutchinson, and in fact he was on one of our Zooms in the early days, and he at the time showed us or told us about the potential for rosé, pale Provençal style rosé from Chile, and made from Cinsault or Pais. And in this instance, we said, look, go for it with Cinsault. And I've just tasted it this evening. And so this is a new rosé that will be here. I tasted it today, so it'll be on the site in about, what are we now? Middle of May. So I would say early July. It'll be $9.99 Angel price. And it is such an impressive rosé that will give, I'm sorry, Katie, not your rosé a run for its money, but every other French rosé other than yours a run for its money. It's just really high quality, beautiful winemaking, very skillful. So it's delicious. Nowhere near as good as Katie's though, unfortunately. And following that, Nina Stocker in Australia. She's made a Pinot Grigio from, she's in Victoria State in Australia. And so this came in today. This is delicious. She's, I had a call with her early my time, regular her time. She'll do a couple of tweets on that. And also, so that is Feder Plucker's daughter, Pinot Grigio, which will be seven.
Be careful how you say that, don't you?
That's correct. That's live. And that will be $7.99. Feder Plucker's daughter, Pinot Grigio, should be here in that one's, let's say, September. And then equally, Feder Plucker's daughter, Merlot, another new wine from Nina. And that will also be $7.99, and that will also be here around September. All things going well, like no pandemics or anything like that. And I know lots of people have been waiting for Muscadet from Libo, Libo. That's taken a while for us to just get the exact blend right, and it is here now. So that should be on the site. That should be about 6 weeks away. And then Sam Plunkett, his Butterfly Effect Shiraz, that's rocked up after a rocky ride. Carmen Stevens, we'll at some point we'll have Carmen Stevens on here, but this is her Angel Selection Shiraz. And most people, if you've joined Naked at any point in your life, the whole journey, you will have come across Carmen's wines, fantastic South African winemaker. So that's here, yeah, on the site in about 3 weeks or something like that. And finally, before I hand back to Eamon, is a beautiful, high-class, premium Ribera del Duero. That is it. You love it? Yes. Yeah. It's in Spain, so Rioja is quite well known. Ribera del Duero is another region to the west. It's actually on the Douro River, or Duero, in the Spanish side of the Portuguese border. And it's Tempranillo grape, high-class Spanish Tempranillo, high-class Spanish wines. This is a new winemaker, and more will be revealed about this winemaker in due course from Amy. Okay, back to you, Eamon.
Ooh, thanks, Ray. Cool. Okay, some great questions in so far. Keep letting us know. Steve Barnes, what's your favorite grape and why? Or maybe what's your favorite Katie wine for Naked?
That for me, that's me. Okay. What's my favorite grape and what's my favorite wine? My favorite grape, obviously it's one that we grow up here. My favorite grape is a white grape, and it would be the Grenache Gris. I just love Grenache Gris. It's has a lovely freshness to it, a lovely high acidity to it, and it makes a delicious style of wine. So it's quite herbal too. It's just great. You smell it and you know it comes from my vineyard. And you have Lagar Blanc. I think when things are back to normal, I think you have a little bit of the Lagar Blanc left. And if not, there is a tiny bit of Grenache Gris in the Mere Monsieur Jones white as well. So if I had to pick a single grape variety, it would be that. My favorite wine, however, would definitely be the Fitti. the Fitti Lagar, so it's called Lagar, which means station, because we make it in a lovely little renovated station, which we've converted into a winery. And that's very much thanks to NonKatie, to you guys as well. I know when Eamon first contacted me, he said, what's your dream? You know, what would you like us to do? And I was like, well, we were going to do up the station winery, but I think that's all gone pear-shaped now because we haven't got any wine to sell, and you know. And he said, no, we're going to make it happen. We're going to make it happen. And he said, put Lagar on the label, and you'll see in a couple of years that we have made it happen, and you'll be making that wine in the station. And that's exactly what happened. So it's Lagar range, definitely, and in particular Fitti, which is a very traditional style of wine from this area, but obviously with a Katie twist on it.
Wow. And I'll throw in another question there. What's your favorite non-Katie wine on Naked Wines?
So it's so difficult. I definitely go for Rambler Gin. If that's
wine.
Yeah. And because I just love it. It's just absolutely fantastic. I've never found a gin that comes anywhere close to it. And then I think I'd go for bubbles, because I just love bubbles. So anything with bubbles in it, basically. So in particular, the Cremant de Loire from Villebois, and Jen as well does the sparkling muscat down in Australia. You just put bubbles in it for me. I mean, we don't make bubbles, so yeah, definitely love those wines.
Yeah, you got Limoux down near you, don't you?
We have.
Nice.
Yeah, they make a delicious sparkling wine, actually, Blanquette or Cremant. Still don't quite know the difference between Blanquette and Cremant. I should do, but I don't. And yeah, just call it Limoux. It's lovely. Yeah, really nice.
Good. We'll look out. Question from Bruce: how many hours a day does a winemaker do? It seems relentless.
I've just heard the tractor start up outside.
Good.
Yeah, so that means Jean-Marc is just going to go out and start protecting the vines, and it's 20 to 10. He's got to empty the tank of we're organic up here on our vineyards up here, so it's sulfur and it's copper to protect the vines. He's got 3 hours to empty the tank, because you can't stop with a half tank until you've actually emptied it. So that's Jean-Marc on the vineyard side. You never stop. I think I can honestly say you never stop. It's not a job. This is not a job. Me sitting here talking to you, it's definitely not a job. It's not even a passion, because it's just the way of life. It's just what we do, and it's just like you just get on with it and you don't think about it. And it's so varied. Like you never know really what's going to happen when you wake up, apart from I've tried to get a bit of sort of discipline in my life with my rambles, so I'm out there at a certain time. But apart from that, you just don't know what's going to happen. It could be you're tasting wine, blending wine. This is out of harvest, of course. It could be that you're designing a label. It could be that you're like doing the paperwork for a lorry that's leaving. You could be loading the lorry with a forklift. You know, there's all things that aren't glamorous, but the best, although, you know, forklifts can be, but the best thing is that you do everything. And that's what Jean-Marc and myself, when we started Domaine Jones, the idea was we wanted to do everything ourselves. Now there's a certain limit which we've reached and gone over, because we now have 2 people working for us in the vineyards. But it was very much the satisfaction of seeing the vines grow, seeing the grapes ripen, picking the grapes. Most of it's by hand. And you get so attached to the vineyards, and then you make the wine from those lovely vines. So you're actually making the wine, and then you bottle it, and then you leave it, you know, it leaves. And that moment is still like, oh, it's going. And then you get all the comments from naked angels saying, wow, you know, I've just tasted this, I love it, and you know, when's the next bit coming, and this goes really well with this. And all the feedback that we get sort of really helps to, yeah, it's the end of the chain. We do everything from like pruning the vines right up and to you drinking it with your dinner. Or
Are you living the Manon de Source life that you said at the beginning? Do you think?
Yeah, a bit too much actually, because that's a bit of a tragedy. I can't say it. Tragedy. Why can't I say it? Somebody say it for me.
Because you finished your own.
He's good at French, yeah.
Yeah, I do feel, and I think all my life is just a bit one big drama, really, or I make it into one big drama. And I'm loving all this like Zoom and the lives in the vineyards, and I live in the middle of nowhere, 800 people, and yet it feels like it's the center of the universe. Or I've created my little universe.
Yeah, it's absolutely fantastic. I mean, and it really is. You create your own success sometimes it's taken away from you or influence, but you work very, very hard in the winemaking. But also, Katie, I think when you first connected with Eamon, and you realized that the connection with Naked is more than just selling wine, but and that is what the platform is. It's a community, and you are one of the advocates of that, and replying to customers' Angels comments. And that's it. And if you invest back in the Angels, they reinvest back. And it's just about having it's one big WhatsApp chat, so you're just grateful of people's love, and you're grateful of theirs.
It's definitely that. I mean, it is like having a special, like Facebook, and even a big mention as well to the Archangels. Mm-hmm. Like literally, no, I was going to say something I wasn't meant to say, but I've got 4 Archangels, and they have just been absolutely fabulous during the last 8 weeks that we've been confined here. And they have just, like, we've been backwards and forwards on WhatsApp. Beth has helped me with the Zoom tastings. We've got David, Owen, and Paul, and it's just like my best friends. It's just really brilliant. And it's another great thing that's come out of this awful situation. But yeah, the Angels and Archangels, it's a great idea.
Awesome. Katie, tell me, got a good question here from you, and can you speak more about the Fitti, please? So it's 15 quid, so it might be a stretch for some people, but it's one of my favorite wines on Naked, full stop. So tell people why they should make a stretch for that.
So the Fitti. So Fitti is an appellation wine from the south of France. So it's actually named after a village. So there is the village of Fitti. So it's not a grape variety. Lots of people think that the grape variety is actually Fitti. It's not. Fitti is a blend of grapes. So it always has to be at least 2, if not 3, of the traditional grapes from down here. So you've got Carignan, Grenache, and you've got Syrah. So it's those 3 grape varieties that we use, but ours is all from very old vines. So the vines are up to 110 years old. And like we were saying earlier, the older the vine, the lesser the yield. So you're getting less production, but what you are getting is much more concentrated. And then it's got some oak aging on the wine as well. So it's about 30% of it is aged in small oak French barrels in the Lagar winery. And it makes it's a full-bodied wine, definitely, but it has a certain elegance to it that really lifts it. So it's not heavy, it's not sort of it's just got a lightness, even though it's a full-bodied wine, which sounds a bit strange, but it's got a freshness to the wine, and it makes it really good with food as well. So traditionally it will be wild boar. So if any of you have got a wild boar in your freezer at the moment, get it out. No. So anything like game, or having said that thing, also lentil casserole, something a bit spicy, it will stand up to that as well. Cheese, really good with cheese. Or I just like it, probably not meant to say this, by itself. Just a glass, the end of the day. It's a big wine, and sometimes you just want a little nibble with it. And
I've had it with Pringles, sour cream and onion Pringles, and
it doesn't sound quite right, does it? But it is.
It's just one of those wines to have in the rack for any great occasion. It's the perfect for me Sunday roast wine. It's so cozy. It's raining outside, and you have a big glass of that, or on its own, or now we have nice weather with the barbecue, and it's a real treat as well. And 15 quid is maybe it's a lot for people, you know, based on normal wine, but equally if you're in a restaurant and you'll easily drop 30, 35. It's, you know, when you look at it that way, for me, it's a no-brainer. So yeah, I'm a huge fan. Another question here. What we got here? Do the vines get too old for use? This is from Rob Jackson. Do the vines get too old to use for wine? And what do you do then? And do you ever need to replace the vines due to age?
Yeah. Yes, they do get very old. Well, ours are 110, like the oldest ones we have.
Wow.
And you do find that every year you'll get one or two that sort of drop off and just die. Normally it's from sort of wood disease in the vine itself, and that's just a natural occurrence. And what we do, we wait until there's like enough, that sounds a bit wrong, that enough have died, and then we go in and we actually replant with younger vines in some of the vineyards. Now, we don't do that in all of the vineyards. If we do it, we'll use Grenache. If it's a red vineyard, we'll use Grenache, because most of my vineyards, because they're really old, I say like that's a Carignan vineyard or that's a Grenache, but in actual fact there's a bit of something else in there as well, because they would have been planted a bit sort of willy-nilly when they were planted. It was actually, they took cuttings in the village. They'd have somebody who actually took cuttings. If you wanted to replant a vineyard, they would actually take the cuttings and graft them themselves, so they wouldn't be buying it in from anywhere. So they'd actually be going to one of their vineyards, take cuttings, put it onto rootstock and plant the vineyard. And by doing that, it just turned into a bit of a mixture in the vineyards. So now I've forgotten the question because I went off on my grafting.
What about replanting? And
yeah, okay. So we do go in and we do plant in between the rows of old vines. We will put some grapes in, like Grenache, which can produce good fruit young. We would never plant a young Carignan, even if it's a Carignan vineyard. We would never go in and put in a young Carignan plant, because a young Carignan is just like, it takes years. In our village, it takes like 20 years to produce anything near sort of quality wine. That's in our village, you know. This is a very local area, but so yes, we do. And then alternatively, what we would do, rather than replanting, what I prefer to do is, when a vineyard there's less vines, when it's really not economically viable to go up and work it, I would actually buy another old vine vineyard.
In terms of the long-term investment, you'd buy the young vines, you'd have to buy land, and you'd have to wait for, well, typically 4 years for a normal vine, but you're saying Carignan, you'd be at sort of 10 to 15 years.
Yeah, here.
So actually the return on investment just to go and buy an older vineyard.
Yeah. And also, because I mentioned that we do things completely differently to anybody else in the village, it means that everybody else wants the younger vines with the higher yields and the bigger production, because that's what you need in the cooperative. Whereas we want completely the opposite. We want the older vines with very small production and very high quality. And so those vineyards are quite easy to come by in the village, because there's not a great demand for them. But don't be fooled though, because you buy an old vine, it may feel cheap when you buy it, but the work that needs to go into it, and it's all hand-picked. I mentioned John Mark's going out on his tractor now. On my vines, it's actually a backpack on your back, and you spray like with a backpack. So it's a lot of work. So it outweighs the cost.
I just have a quick question, Amy, before you continue with the other question. Katie, when you go on the tasting tour and you meet winemakers from around the world, and you've formed great friendships with those winemakers in different hemispheres, and you see them year after year, do they envy your access to, say, old vines? And do you envy anything about their, let's say, you know, I don't know, mechanization or whatever? So, but do people envy your access to these old vines?
Yeah, I think people are completely astounded that actually the cheapest vines in our village are the old vines, because in other areas they would be the prime vineyard spots, and they would be a lot more expensive than the younger vines that are producing higher yields. So I think that's because of the cooperative system here, that people do find it like quite astounding. I remember Carmen just being completely like, what?
And also, I'm sure you're very good mates with Jen Pfeiffer, aren't you?
Am I? I'm not sure about that.
Oh, okay. Well, okay. There's a couple of clashes, but then you always make up on the bus the next morning.
Yeah, no, definitely.
They get rowdy. But I mean, old vines in Australia really are cherished. I mean, it might come into the history of the country as well, and the first people who are, you know, or foreigners that arrived there. But yeah, no, I think you are lucky without, and I know you're lucky, but others think you're in a gold mine. So
yeah, and they would do anything to get their hands on my old vineyards, I think.
Yeah,
I think.
And especially with Jen.
Especially Jen. Yeah. Alternatively, that I don't know. I never really thought about being envious. Oh, I was envious of somebody's forklift truck once, because they've got
that's for Forklift Magazine, which we have a Zoom meeting on at midnight Friday.
Katie, tell us about, you mentioned wild boar in the freezer earlier, which is probably the best place for them in your area. Tell us about, if it's not, you know, locals trying to do bad things. Tell us about your friends, the boars.
I hate the boars. Yeah, wild boars. Basically, there's far more wild boars than people in this area, and they do terrible damage to the vineyards. So there are pest number one. They are, if they get in now, they actually just turf up the soil in between the vines. So they're looking for snails. I think Jean-Marc told me they're looking for snails or worms or things to eat. And they literally, it looks like it's been ploughed. When you go in the next morning, it looks like you've had a plough in your vineyard, which just makes it difficult when you want to go in and plough, because the tractor's like all over the place. And sometimes you have to go in, smooth it out where the wild boar have been. They also, during the harvest, just a nightmare. They're really greedy. So they come in and they'll devastate a vineyard if the grapes are ripe, especially if they're muscat grapes. They love the sweet muscat grapes, which I do too. But if they get in and you haven't turned your electric fence on to keep them out, they hoover the grapes off the stalks. So you're just left with the stalks. And that happened to me once in our early years. I think I learned the hard way. And we went in, we were literally going in to put the electric fence up, but the wild boar got there the day before and there was nothing left. And they just ate the muscat. It was like one little plot surrounded by other grapes. And yeah. So no, not my friend really at all.
Wow, that's amazing.
Do you know Norrell Robertson, don't you?
I do.
Yeah. I think he told me that he's in Carriena in Spain, so it's sort of near Navarra, and he said that he puts hair cuttings from a barber shop.
Does he do that? Okay.
In the vineyard. I mean, it sounds as disgusting as it is, but the scent of human hair. There's worse. Yeah, detracts the boars.
Yeah, no, I've heard that. I have heard that it could be quite a good thing now that everybody needs their hair cutting, that we could actually get quite a lot of hair and just.
It's a new commodity.
Yeah, that's another good thing that's coming out.
Selling hair to the French, yeah.
But the other one is you actually wee in a tin can and then you place it around the vineyard in strategic places, is what I've heard as well. I haven't tried that one, funnily enough, but that apparently must have the same sort of deterrent.
Well, we look forward to tuning into your live morning Instagram when you're exploring.
That'll be tomorrow.
Alternatively, if we want to do an angel rescue case of 12 slaughtered wild boars and sent over the UK, I'm sure there'd be great demand.
Yes.
And you'll let us have them.
I'll
tell Jean-Marc to get his gun out.
Yeah.
Vegetarian options and vegan available.
Fraser, great question here. What kept you motivated through adversity, Katie?
I think the motivation was, and I don't quite know, looking back, I don't know how we did it, but the motivation was almost the challenge of turning it into a positive. That was one motivation, is like, how can we take this and how can we turn it into a positive? And although we weren't sort of thinking about what we're going to do, we managed to have the positive attitude that we needed to be able to see positives and to seize positive action from it. And I think that helped. And then the other thing is basically I've come here as an outsider. Even though I've been here for 25 years, I'm always going to be an outsider. And I met Jean-Marc, and Jean-Marc isn't an outsider. He's from the village. He's a farmer. He is just, or before he met me, he was just a normal farmer, farming his grapes, very ambitious. He had a big vision for the cooperative. He saw where it wanted to go. It all went pear-shaped in the recession, and he got kicked out. And I think to see his passion of what he wants to achieve and how I can help him achieve it as well, that's my motivation. And I would never, what's the word, he feels he failed at the cooperative. That's sort of another story, and I don't want him to fail at this.
No. Well, we will happily keep drinking and supporting that, because we get great pleasure. Exactly. One other question here from Ashley: what's the biggest sacrifice you feel you've made to have this way of life? Any regrets?
No, je ne regrette rien. I won't sing it because
very good.
No, it's not the things you do you regret, it's things you don't do. It's always been my motto. And sacrifices, I don't know. I mean, I could say I feel a long way from my family, my parents and my sisters, who are in England, but they love coming down here. So, and they enjoy, well, they didn't enjoy it when it wasn't too hot in the village, but they do enjoy coming down here. And I know my mum and dad just absolutely love coming down and helping out in the vineyard and doing what they can in the winery. And so sacrifices, I don't think that, I don't see it like that. And no, I can't think of perhaps the social life, but that's all changed now.
Yeah, this is the new social life.
How many people are here? I've got 1,000 people.
I've got 1,000 people.
I've got more people on here than there are in the village.
Wow.
That is like, that's, we don't talk about revenge, but that for me, that's my answer to the people who emptied my vats. It's like,
yay.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody.
And you still have the vineyard, Katie, the first one you bought.
I do. It's across the border in Moray, the Languedoc-Roussillon border. So we still have that little vineyard, and we've ummed and ahed about it because we work the vineyards here organically, and it's half an hour away. It's much harder than actually having it on your doorstep, because there's a lot more sort of looking at the vine and observing the vine, and then going out and protecting it as it needs it. So we've ummed and ahed, but I went the other day, I actually did one of my rambles on Friday from Moray, and there's something about that vine. If mum and dad are watching, I'm not going to sell it. I can't. It's just, and that's how you just get attached to the land. I sound like I'm French now, don't I? You get attached to the land, and I can understand it. It's like there is some sort of attachment or feeling that you get when you go to these vineyards, and that's even in the rambles as well. Like I go into a vineyard and you just sort of think, wow, it's lovely. You get the feeling, you get the vibes, the vine vibes.
Yeah. Wow. Well, we're out of time now, so I just want to say thank you so much, Katie, for joining us tonight. And like I said earlier, every time we chat, I just learn so much from you and your tales of the vineyards and everything you've been through. When I drink one of these wines, it just takes me there. And I've been lucky to visit you and kind of see it for myself, but equally, the way you tell the stories and everything that's happened, we're so thrilled and honored to be able to work with you and support you. And I'm sure the angels on board tonight will say the same. So thank you so much for joining us, and good luck with everything coming up. And we'll actually see you next week with Claudia and Jen. And Ray, we're going to be outnumbered next week by the ladies. We're really looking forward to that. But it's been brilliant just focusing on you tonight, Katie, and hearing everything. So thank you so much, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks, Katie. Take good care. Big love to Jean-Marc.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, I'm going to go
absolutely
and see what he's up to. But yeah, thanks everybody. Thanks, Eamon. It's great. Thanks, Ray. And thanks all of you, Angels. You know, as I said, fantastic to see you. Brilliant. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Bye-bye.